There's a reason I never sleep when it snows. People think it's the memories, the gunfire, the screams, but that's not it. Not really. It's the silence. The way fresh snow smothers sound makes it easier to hear the breathing. I heard it in 1944, crouched in a trench lined with frozen corpses. And some nights, when the wind dies down, I swear I still do. I never told anyone what really happened out there until now. It was December when they sent us east. The front had shifted again, and command wanted the old trench network north of Bistrica reoccupied, a whisper post, barely a blip on any map. The men we replaced had gone silent 4 days before, just after the last storm. I remember the ride in, no motor vehicles, horses, boots, and quiet. Snow fell in curtains. Men marched with their heads bowed as if the sky itself pressed down. We were 12, young, hardened by winter and war, but not prepared for what we'd find. The trenches appeared after sundown, dark seams in the earth, buried under feet of snow and silence. Our boots thudded against timber and ice. Everything creaked. Nothing answered. Lieutenant Richter ordered us down. The first trench was half collapsed, the walls crusted with frost, rifles still leaning where they'd been left. A black iron stove sat cold and open in the command bunker, a mess tin beside it frozen with something brown inside. There were no lights, no men, but signs of them lingered, shadows of life just recently gone. Then Private Koenig screamed. We found the first body beneath a canvas tarp near the munitions pit. His face was gone, peeled, not blown. The chest cavity was split wide open, like something had climbed out from inside. No signs of a firefight, no bullet wounds, just torn meat and frozen organs. We tried not to panic. I remember Richter looking around, jaw clenched, muttering, "No Soviets would waste time like this." Then someone noticed the claw marks in the trench wall, deep, uneven, too large for any knife, too wide for a bear. We buried the body in the snow, said nothing. No one wanted to admit it out loud, but we all saw it. That wasn't combat. That was something else. We set up camp in the second trench line, more intact, better protected from the wind. Still no bodies, but belongings were scattered everywhere. Helmets, journals, unstrapped boots. One bunker had a child's drawing nailed to the inside wall. Stick figures with too many limbs. Koenig swore it hadn't been there earlier. That night, Richter assigned watches. I drew second shift, paired with a meal, the quiet check with a long stare, and a rosary carved into the stock of his rifle. He lit a cigarette and whispered something in his language. I didn't ask what. I didn't want to know. At some point, we heard breathing, not from each other. This was distant, drawn out, wet. We extinguished our lantern and listened. Crunch, snow, slow and deliberate. Another crunch. Not a patrol, not boots. Something heavier. Something that didn't care about being heard. Then a shape, a silhouette, passed along the trench rim, just for a second, big, upright. The moon caught its edge, and I saw fur bristling against the wind, legs too long, head bent forward. It paused at the edge and then vanished. No one else saw it. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning we found him, a survivor, German uniform, curled up in the corner of the medical shelter beneath 2 layers of blood-soaked bandages. He hadn't frozen. His wounds were cauterized, badly, almost as if he'd done it himself. He couldn't speak at first. His tongue was split, or maybe bitten. We gave him morphine and waited. His eyes wouldn't stop moving, over our shoulders, toward the walls. At sundown, he finally spoke. 3 words. It walks backward. Then he laughed, and then he screamed until his lungs gave out. That night, the snow fell heavier, and we heard it again, closer. Not a howl, not a roar, just breathing and footsteps that didn't crunch the snow. They sank into it like the weight was more than flesh. We stayed low, rifles ready, staring into the white beyond the trench wall. Nothing came, but the lanterns flickered, and the survivor's body was gone by morning. There were no tracks in the snow, no drag marks, no blood trail, no signs that the survivor ever existed. Just the flattened cot where we'd laid him and a ring of frost that hadn't melted overnight. I asked Richter what he thought happened. He didn't answer. He just ordered the trench sealed at both ends and gave us 2 rules. Never be alone. Never speak its name. No one asked what he meant. We already knew. We posted guards at every corner of the trench, dug a new latrine pit, reinforced the comms line even though we all knew it was dead. It wasn't about function. It was about control, about routine, about pretending that the world outside the trench hadn't gone silent. But the forest didn't care. Every branch looked like a twisted limb. Every shadow stretched too far. The snow never stopped falling, and we never stopped watching. On the 3rd day, Emil found the first set of tracks above the trench line. I remember the way he called us over, not with fear, with confusion, because the prints weren't paw-shaped. They weren't boots either. They looked human, barefoot, 12 inches long. Each step perfectly placed along the trench rim, pacing the full length of our position. Unbroken, deliberate, no signs of slipping or cold. They circled us. That night, it snowed again, but only outside the trench. Inside, the snow stopped halfway down the walls, like an invisible barrier held it back. Emil stood for hours staring at the edge, whispering prayers. No one wanted to go on watch, I volunteered. Not out of bravery, out of desperation. I wanted to see it. Prove to myself it was real. Because the alternative, that our minds had cracked open in the cold, was worse. I sat alone with my rifle cradled across my knees, listening. Snow crackling on the wood, ice forming on my gloves, my breath misting in short, nervous bursts. And then I heard scraping, not footsteps, not breathing, scraping, like claws dragging across wood. The sound was above me, directly over the trench roof. I looked up, heart slamming. Something was walking the length of the trench, slow, deliberate, its claws hooking into the timber with each step. I stayed completely still. Every instinct screamed to run, to call for help, but some quiet part of me, some part carved from survival, knew if I made a sound, I'd never be found again. Then it stopped, right above me. I held my breath. A drop of saliva hit the brim of my helmet. It was warm. The next morning, one of the northern bunkers collapsed, buried under snow. 2 men inside. We dug them out in shifts. One was already dead, neck broken. The other was still breathing, but wrong. His eyes were clouded. His teeth chattered nonstop. He kept whispering, "It wore his face." We asked whose. He didn't answer. Later, we found his journal. He'd drawn something over and over again. A man-shaped figure, but the eyes were always on the chest, not the face. A vertical slit where a mouth should be. And antlers, not horns, antlers, like a deer. That night we burned his notebook. Tensions split the unit. Half wanted to leave, take their chances in the forest. The rest, Richter included, insisted on staying. "It wants us scared," he said. "We run, we die." That was when the voice came. It called from the comms bunker, crackling over the radio like a broadcast. Only it wasn't on. No one had touched it in days. We stood outside the door, listening. It wasn't in German. It wasn't in Russian. It was in Emil's voice, begging for help. But Emil stood beside me, pale and shaking. He whispered, "That's not me." We opened the door. The room was empty, but claw marks ran the entire length of the ceiling. Long, deep gouges dragging toward the far wall. That wall had no exit, just a smear of something dark and greasy leaking from a crack in the boards. We sealed the room, nailed it shut, but even days later we'd hear the voice again. Always different, always familiar. Sometimes it called in Richter's voice. Sometimes it laughed like my brother did before he died at Kursk. Always wrong, always hollow. I began to understand the rules. It didn't want to kill us quickly. It wanted to wear us down, make us paranoid, isolate us, drive us into the dark by our own hand. It moved like fog, disguised itself as memory, as family, as us, and then it made its first move. The flare pistol went missing on the 7th night. Richter flipped, tore through every pack, screamed at everyone. No one confessed. That evening, a shot rang out. One of the younger soldiers, Otto, was gone, just gone. We found his bedroll split open, his boots missing. His footprints led into the southern trench tunnel and stopped halfway down. The wall at the end of that tunnel, it wasn't a wall anymore. It was open, a passage previously buried, clawed free from behind. Otto's helmet lay at the entrance. Inside it were teeth, human teeth, all of them his, arranged in a smile. We didn't sleep. We didn't speak. Even Richter looked haunted now. The trench didn't feel like protection anymore. It felt like bait, like we were being herded, And behind every creak, every flicker of light, was something watching, something smiling. We stopped calling it a trench. By the 9th night, it felt more like a grave, a cold earthen throat swallowing us deeper with each breath. The timber groaned like ribs under pressure. The walls sweated black. Shadows moved without light. Every corner felt watched. Something had changed. We were no longer being hunted. We were being led. Richter stopped sleeping. He patrolled every 2 hours with his bayonet unsheathed, dragging it along the walls like he wanted it to hear him coming. Emil and I were the last who still spoke in full sentences. The others mumbled to themselves or stared up at the trench rim like they were waiting for something. And maybe they were. The voices came back, louder, closer, not over the radio this time, inside the trench. They called to us by name. Mine first. Eric. That's what I heard just after midnight. The voice was my mother's. Calm, warm. But she died in 1940. Bombing raid. I followed it. Against every instinct, I walked down the southern trench, where Otto vanished. The passage he'd entered had changed again. It had widened, carved open, almost deliberately. Roots dangled from the ceiling like veins. Claw marks raked the mud walls, deep enough to snap your fingers if you brushed them wrong. The floor sloped downward into a hollow dark that didn't echo. I don't know why I entered. Maybe I wanted to see it. Maybe I wanted it to see me. I don't remember falling. I must have slipped, because when I came to, I was underneath the trench system. A forgotten crawl space, reinforced like the old mines we used to dig out for artillery lines. And that's where I found the nest. A wide circular den of rotted uniforms, shredded canvas, and frozen bones, all human. Strips of dog tags, helmets, fingers, half of Otto's face, still wearing a look of disbelief. At the center of it all, a totem, not a shrine, a warning, built of broken rifles, jawbones, and skulls split down the center and turned inward, like someone had tried to silence the screaming. It stood behind me. I didn't hear it arrive. I only noticed when the air changed, when the walls began to sweat, and the temperature dropped to something ancient. I turned, and there it was, not a wolf, not a man, something in between, stitched together by old curses and starvation, its spine bent wrong, its skin too tight. Patches of fur clung to it like disease. Its hands, if they could be called that, hung below its knees, fingers too long, claws curved inward like hooks. But it was the eyes that stopped me. They were human, not like a trapped soul. Worse, like someone chose to stay inside. It didn't charge. It crawled, slowly, deliberately, like it wanted me to run. I didn't. Instead, I raised my rifle and fired, point blank, right between the eyes. The wood shattered. The bullet ricocheted, off bone. It laughed. God help me, it laughed. A low, shuddering growl that rattled my ribs, and then it leapt. The next thing I remember is Emil pulling me from the tunnel. I was covered in blood, 3 fingers missing, teeth marks on my shoulder, my rifle gone, my helmet cracked in half like an egg. He said he heard the shot and followed it. He said he found me screaming, alone. He never saw the creature, and no one believed me when we were found 3 days later by Allied scouts. They thought we were Soviet deserters, prisoners of shock. They sent us to a field hospital in France, then home, case closed, file lost. Emil died in 1976. Hit by a car, they said. But I always wondered, because 2 days before, he called me, first time in years. And the only thing he said was, "I saw it again, in the snow." I'm the last now, and I still live near the woods. I've remarried, had a son, a good life mostly. But every winter, when the snow begins to fall in that same soundless way, I hear breathing, deep and slow. Sometimes it's above my house, sometimes it's just outside my window, and sometimes it's already inside. I never sleep when it snows, because I know it remembers me, and someday it'll want me back. If you're still breathing, go ahead and like the video. Subscribe if you dare. There are plenty more nightmares waiting for you. And whatever you do, don't forget to ring the bell. It's the only way you'll hear the warnings in time.